Did you think I wasn't coming? Here I am. Hey there, my friends. It's Mary Rose here. It's Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time, and I'm just going to adjust this a little bit. I welcome you to this talk. I can see that we've got some folks here and more coming in. And if you happen to be watching on Facebook, you can let me know that you're here and what your name is by using that link, streamyard.com/Facebook. If you click on it, it means that if you leave a comment, that I will be able to see your name and know who you are. And if you don't, you can still leave a comment. It'll just come up as Facebook user, which is totally fine by me. So welcome to the Wednesday live stream. Let me open up the comment box and see who's here. I welcome you all. Today we're going to talk about process. Now, this is one of the things that we talk about occasionally. This live stream cycles around the topics of writing craft, story structure, and the mindset of the working writer. And process is one of those topics that sounds like it might be writing crafty, but I'm here to tell you that it's really a lot about mindset. So this is going to be kind of a mindset talk, but overlapping with the practicalities of how we actually do our writing work. So before we dive into this talk of process, is there a perfect process? Should we be thinking more about process? Should we be thinking less about process? So many interesting questions. Let me introduce myself in case you're new to the live stream. I'm Mary Rose Wood. I'm an author, best known for my middle grade fiction. I'm also the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is a program and community that I created to train and mentor writers who are serious about leveling up to a professional level. And by professional, I mean ready to publish. And by publish, I mean that you've written stuff that you want to please the readers. It's not just about you. This isn't just a private hobby. It's something that you're interested in doing in a way that will work for others. That's what I mean by publish and professional, just in case you're wondering. If you're not on the Path of the Storyteller mailing list, I do encourage you to join. You can just go over to pathofthestoryteller.com. There's links below the video and get on the mailing list because I've got some interesting new offerings coming up. And the people who are on my mailing list are not only going to be the first to know, but they're going to get a special kind of introductory access to this. And I'm pretty excited about it. More details to come, but definitely get on the mailing list if you're not already. Waving hi to Erin, waving hi to Mia. It's good to see you all. And as ever, this is a live stream, and I invite anyone who's here live to participate in the conversation by leaving comments. I'm going to be talking about process, and I would love to know about your process, what your questions about your process are, whether some of the things that I'm about to say feel a little provocative, make you feel a little called out, make you feel like you want to make some changes. It's all good. We're here to learn. So process, I came up with this topic for today because questions about process have been popping up often lately in the Path of the Storyteller community. And when I say questions about process, I mean questions about how should we measure our progress? How do I decide what to do every day when I sit down to work? How can I plan my writing week for best results? How can I be more efficient? You know, how do I balance the different tasks that are on a writer's plate? And there are many different tasks. Sometimes we're researching, sometimes we're drafting, sometimes we're revising, sometimes we're not even at that stage and we're still in the you could call it the pre-writing phase, just the phase when we're still even trying to zero in on what we want to write about, which involves work. You know, it involves a certain amount of exploration, sometimes research, external exploration, but a lot of internal exploration. What is it that we want to write about? So all of this is stuff that ends up on a writer's to-do list. So how do you balance all those things? How do you know which one is the best use of your time on any given day? That's what I mean by process. Process sometimes incorporates other questions as well, like, you know, is it better to outline or not to outline? If I do outline, how much should I outline? If I don't want to outline, how far can I go before I get into trouble without a plan? You know, all of these sort of questions, not about the work itself, but about how we approach the work. That's what I mean by process. Now, I'm kind of grateful for this question as well, because just the word process, it's one of those words when you say it over and over again, its meaning starts to evaporate. And all I could think of was the processed American cheese that I pretty much kept me alive when I was a child. I'm a child of the 60s and 70s, and we ate grilled cheese sandwiches like it was the most nutritious thing on earth. 2 slices of Wonder Bread, white as the driven snow, with you know, I don't even know what to call it. I'm hesitate to call it cheese. That fantastic yellow stuff that they called American cheese, probably still do, wrapped in cellophane, individually wrapped, right, in this plastic. And you would peel it off, and you couldn't even tell from the way it felt in your fingers which was the cheese and which was the plastic. It was the same thing. One was clear, one was yellow. So you put the yellow stuff on the Wonder Bread, you grilled it. When you cut it open and opened it up, it stretched like silly putty, which nothing in nature should really do, right? Am I right? I mean, we don't eat silly putty. These sandwiches are delicious. I lived on them as a kid. Absolutely lived on them. Now, this is not cheese. This is processed cheese or processed cheese product or whatever they call it, right? But you can see that the word process means something that's not in a state of nature. If it's been processed, something's been done to it. It's been removed. Maybe a few iterations of removal from what its natural state was. And that's my childhood connection with the word process. And now I'm grown up and I'm a writer and I mentor writers, and we throw the word process around all the time. And it really got me thinking about whether we need to examine this word, much as I wouldn't feel that great about, processed cheese on my plate right now at this stage of my life. Are we over processing our feelings about our writing? Are we going too many iterations away from a state of nature about our writing? Is processed writing less nourishing somehow than unprocessed, organic, farm to table writing? So this is the way my mind works, and so I'm going down this bit of a trail, and I thought I need to talk about process. I need to figure out if all of our good intentions as writers, our desire to do better, to be better, to get it right, to be more productive, to work efficiently, to not waste time, to get it, just to get it in a state of to optimize it, to hack it into its perfect form, this perfect process, this elusive perfect process that people are always looking for. That all feels so virtuous. And yet, I don't think that American cheese is more virtuous than an unprocessed piece of really, good cheese, or a fresh vegetable from my local farm, or. And so I thought, oh, wow, there's something to unravel here. So that's what I want to talk about today. And I already see some glimmers of like, oh, this might be interesting. And hey, let's bring Terry Finn into the conversation. Farm to table writing. That's it. That's what we're going to talk about today. Are we over processing our writing? Okay, interesting, right? So let me just define some terms and then explore the why. First of all, why we might be tempted to be over processing our process, over processing our writing practice. And then I definitely want to give you some, maybe red flags to look out for, and definitely some solutions, how to approach this potential state of being over processed, over concerned with process. So hang around. I think we're going to get some practical tips on the table before we're done today. So I want to make a distinction, first of all. When I talk about process, I'm not talking about craft. I'm a big believer in craft. I teach craft, I use craft, I swear by craft, and I think it's very empowering. And writing craft is like the nuts and bolts techniques how to write well, how to write in a way that's more effective for our readers. Basically, that's what writing craft is about. That's what story structure is about. That's not what I mean by process. That's technique. That's knowledge. What I mean is the way of deploying what we know, of actually getting to work, approaching the work. Some examples of the kinds of things that writers consider a process is, well, what is my writing schedule? Right? How do I approach weaving my writing practice into my work? Do I have a schedule? Are schedules good? Are schedules bad? Is morning good? Is afternoon better? Is evening best? Like, we start to get drilled down into the specifics of how I'm going to schedule my work. That's part of our process, right? How do we measure our progress? Are we the kind of writer that likes to say 500 words a day and I'm good? 500 words a day and I put a gold star on my sticker chart. 1,000 words a day, I feel fine, and less than that, I feel like I wasted a day, right? So we might measure word count. This is really common. It's very common. A lot of writers do this. Some writers don't want to measure word count for a variety of reasons, because word count is not always an indicator in any way of how productive our day was. Sometimes we cut 100 words and that is a huge victory. Right? Like what we measure tends to be incentivized. So we have to be very careful about what we choose to measure, right? Because if we're measuring word count, then we're incentivizing ourselves to write words. But good writing is about many, many, many things. And words are just one piece of it. And certainly compression is a huge virtue in writing. So are we measuring the amount of words we add? Are we measuring the amount of words we subtract? You see, if you're measuring words and incentivizing words, it becomes unclear. So maybe you measure something else. What do you measure? Do you measure how far along in your story you've gotten? Do you measure how much time you spent writing? I mean, this to me is, that we can all get on board with. I sat down 3 days this week and spent an hour in each of those days working on my writing. So I'm measuring my time. So that might be something, but this measurement is part of your process too. How do you plan what you're going to do? Are you the kind of person that, sits there on Sunday as the new week is about to unfold? You look at your planner, you've got your color-coded sticky tabs, you've got a few different special pens and your lucky pencil, and you say, okay, on Monday, I'm going to work on chapter 2 and I'm going to draft 1,000 words. And on Wednesday, I'm going to revise those 1,000 words and make bullet points for chapter 3. And on Friday, I'm going to start chapter 3. And then it goes like, do you drill down to that level of planning? Or are you just, I showed up to the work, let's see what happens, and anything in between? This could be part of your process, your level of planning, the amount to which you commit time and energy to deciding in advance what it is you're going to do. Here's another one that's a big part of many writers' process: rituals. You may have rituals about your writing, and some writers take this to a really granular level. They will take the time to buy new books, special pencils, and create like the Spotify playlist to get them in the mood for this particular book. And that becomes part of it. They might create a mood board, collages. They might have a special writing sweater that they put on. They might have a lucky mug, right, to put the coffee in, the special writing coffee, without which nothing can happen. So you can see we're creatures of habit. We want to stimulate our ability to form good habits, which is a very real and important resource that we can manipulate. Humans can form habits. If we repeat the same thing often enough, it becomes habitual. And if we do this with intention, we can form good habits. If we do it with no intention, whatever we repeat is going to become a habit, whether we want it to or not. So maybe better to take a look at the things that we repeat and make sure that we're forming the habits that we want to have. One great thought exercise about this is to extrapolate into the future. If every day were like today, where would I be in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years? if my day today was replicated, where do I go? Where do I end up? In other words, am I heading in on the trajectory that I need to get to my destination? So rituals are part of this, habits are part of this. So all of these sort of come into process. Oh, another great one is our equipment. Like, we can get very militant about, I like to write in Scrivener. I like to write in Microsoft Word. I need to write by hand. I absolutely require my laptop. This is all part of the process. So we build this machine, and no offense, but it can become like a Rube Goldberg machine of process around our writing. It's got to have all these questions in play all the time. And one of the things that happens is that we start to question what we've built. Am I doing this the best way? Am I doing this the right way? And then this is why these questions get asked. And as I said, I've been hearing a lot of these questions recently, where writers are really focused on elements of their process, wanting to make sure they're doing it right, doing it the best way. And I have to ask, why are we so precious about our process? What is being served by devoting so much mental bandwidth to this machinery that is not writing? It's the machine that we build around our writing. One of the things that occurred to me is that process is like a cool word for what we used to call discipline. Now, discipline is kind of a loaded word. It sounds like we're getting punished, right? And there's a reason it sounds that way, because the word discipline, to my mind, is usually used to describe how we bring ourselves to do something we don't want to do. That's what discipline is, right? If we want to do it, we don't have discipline about it. We don't have to muster discipline. It's just what we want to do. It's what we feel like doing. No one had to discipline me to eat those grilled cheese sandwiches when I was a kid. I wanted to eat them. I probably would enjoy eating one right now. I didn't need discipline to force myself to eat them. I wanted to. No discipline required. And so if we find ourselves over invested in this idea of process, this vast structure of process surrounding our writing, are we just too cool to say that we're looking for discipline? Because as soon as we say we're looking for discipline, we've got to say, why don't I want to write? Why do I need discipline to force myself to do this thing that I say that I want to do? I'm just going to leave that question there to be a little provocative. Those of you who are here live, I would love to hear your thoughts about that. Why do we need to create a structure, kind of a proxy for discipline, this old-fashioned word discipline, to force us to do the thing that we say we want to do? So no discipline ought to be required, right? It's not very logical. So maybe process is just a cool word for discipline. Let me take you back in time. Speaking of childhood pleasures, me and my grilled cheese sandwiches. When we were kids, we used to go out and play. And what do we do when we play? We make stuff up. It's play. Do children need discipline to go out and play? Do they have to muster up a complicated process in order to manipulate themselves into making stuff up? Most of the time, I'm going to say no. This creative energy, this childlike creative energy, seems to be a birthright. It seems to be something that comes quite naturally when we're young. And of course, I will defer to the experts, the early childhood educators out there who know the studies and all the research on this. But I think it's quite well documented that play, imaginative play, is an essential part of brain development when you're young, that this is something that is just built in. and that kids who are deprived of play are really wounded by that. It's a real deprivation to deprive kids of free play, free imaginative play. So I'll let the early childhood educators footnote that for me. But this is what is believed to be the case. And so when we are older and we have taken it upon ourselves to do creative work, like writing, we are making stuff up. It is most certainly a type of play, but it doesn't feel quite as farm to table anymore, does it? It doesn't feel as organic anymore. We as children, we just play. And as adults, we have to use complicated ideas about process to discipline ourselves to do it. So I want to bring in a comment here, because Cynthia Grady is, as ever, one step ahead of me. And this is exactly the point that I want to make, Cynthia. So you're spot on. Is all this process a form of resistance? Let's explore this excellent question from Cynthia. If we're overemphasizing process, are we just ignoring our resistance, using process as a form of resistance? In order to answer this question, let's look at the word resistance and make sure that we have an understanding of what we mean by that. I know that you all intuitively know what this is, and it's a really interesting thing to try to explain the why of. So everyone's answer may be different. But resistance is a kind of a catch-all phrase familiar to writers and creative people of all stripes, I'm quite sure, which describes the doubts, the negative self-talk, the self-sabotage, the ways in which we push back against our push to create. We have a drive to create, and somehow that drive activates an equal opposing force of resistance. And for each one of us, resistance gets expressed in its own diabolical fashion. And you know what it might be for you. And if you want to share that in the comments as well, I think it'd be really helpful to see all the different ways resistance comes up. We become incredibly distractible. We start to make lists of meaningless to-dos, and we say, oh, I'll get to my creative work as soon as I tick off these 10 boxes of things that don't even need to be done. We start to prioritize everything above our creative work. We convince ourselves we don't have time. Everybody's got the same amount of time every day. Nobody gets extra. So as long as we're still here alive and kicking, we've all got the same amount of time every day. Some of us have different types of responsibilities, I know, but there's no such thing as not enough time. There's only such a thing as I have different priorities. You're doing something with all that time you have. You just haven't put your creative work at the top of the priority list. Something's in the number 1 slot. Something's in the number 2 slot, the number 3 slot, right? So you just haven't put your creative work in one of those top slots of things that actually gets attended to. So our forms of resistance are many and various. And as I said, diabolical. And I think one of the most difficult and toxic ones is when we really do have negative self-talk, when we talk to ourselves with cruelty and mockery and contempt. And when we say, who are you to think that you deserve to do this? Who are you to think that you have the ability to do this? Who are you to think that anybody cares whether or not you do this, right? This is ugly stuff. And it's so ugly that I almost don't want to put words to it. I almost don't want to give it space, in the conversation. But it's really important to admit that goes through the back of our minds. And sometimes it goes through the front of our minds. And these are forms of resistance that get in our way. So look at the resistance that appears for you. Be observant, be a self-observer about it, and recognize that that's what it is. It's unpleasant, but it's not you. It's the resistance. You can disassociate from it a little bit. I always used to marvel at my friends who were opera singers. I had a few friends in my life who've been serious professional opera singers, and they had this remarkable thing in common, which they always talked about the voice. They never talked about my voice. They always said the voice. They took this idea of their voice, their highly trained, spectacular operatic voices, and they made sure that it was not them. They were a person. They were a whole human being with all that goes with that. They did not identify with their voices as as themselves. They understood that their humanity was complete even when they weren't singing. And the voice was just a thing. It was like the car, right? It was like, the iron on the ironing board. It was a tool that they used, that they took care of, that they knew how to operate at a professional level, but it wasn't them. And so I encourage you to look at your resistance with this kind of like detachment and say, oh, you're my resistance. You kind of come along with the package. Maybe dealing with you is one of the reasons that it's good for me to pursue my creative work, because it triggers me into looking at my shadow. And this is a journey of personal development. It's a gift to yourself, in a sense, to create a circumstance in which you stir up your own dark side, your stuff, and you say, oh, I've got to make peace with you. I've got to deal with you. I've got to neutralize you. Whatever the right strategy for resolving it is, you can't resolve it unless it's in front of you. If you've buried it at in the back of the closet, you can just ignore it. The minute you start to write, it comes out and says, remember me? Remember me? So I want you to think of this in a different way. And I've got a comment from Mia, which I want to share, that it's a wonderful perspective. I'm grateful for that response, Mia, because I think it actually is very useful when we're dealing with this stuff that comes up with our creative work, to try to say, what can I gain from this? It isn't just a battle of wills, is it? This is where the idea of discipline is a little problematic. How can we integrate what's happening? Right? It's not always about smushing it down, beating it down. How can we learn from what's happening? How can we say, on some level, I'm choosing this experience. I'm choosing to pursue my creative work, and therefore I'm also choosing to activate my own darkest impulses, my own resistance. I'm choosing that. Lucky me. I get to fix this now. I get to work on it, or I get to know it better. It's a long journey. So think about that. That's some of my thoughts about resistance, and that could definitely be something that, if we're still not ready to deal with it, we might get very concerned with our type of pencil and what software we're using, and whether we've got the right size lines on the yellow legal pad, and all this stuff having to do with process. That's really the big one. So here's another thing that an overemphasis on process might mean. And this is important, but not nearly as profound, I think, as what I was just talking about, because this second one is that maybe you're not dealing well with your need to study the craft. If you don't have enough information, if you just don't have enough technique and skill to do the job that you're setting out to do, and you don't want to face that, you might get very involved with, well, if only I had the correct weekly planner, all of these problems would resolve themselves. But it's not so simple. Writing fiction is extremely sophisticated artistic process. It's a real it's a high level undertaking. It's not like something you can learn to do in an afternoon. And so we have to accept that and have realistic expectations about what we've chosen to do. The art form we've chosen to express ourselves in is a complex and advanced art form. We're not drawing with crayons, we're not painting watercolor stuff. We're fiction is just a lot to it. And so if we're not realistic about it and we haven't fully committed to learning how to do it, pure technique, like you have to learn the technique of any other complicated endeavor, right? Then we might distract ourselves from that by over focusing on process. Now, why might we resist technique? I've talked about this before, and let me just say quickly, I do know that many writers are desperate for technique. They read craft book after craft book. They watch lecture after lecture. Maybe they take courses, they go to writing conferences, they belong to groups. Many writers dive wholeheartedly into trying to improve their writing craft. Some don't. Some writers are at a different place. They're really consumed with the desire to write, but they are too shy yet to own the label of I'm a writer. So not owning that label, not being willing to even admit that that's what they want, prevents them from seeking out training. Because how can they bring themselves to seek out training to do something that they can barely admit that they want to do? That's a very real place to be. That's got to be dealt with. But other writers are past that place and they're seeking information and seeking information. And some subset of those writers are really dealing with their craft and they're applying what they're learning and they're striving to be better and they're trying new things. But there is another subset of even those writers, the ones who are on the scent. They're always trying to improve their craft, that they absorb, they take in, but they do not implement. They think that if they keep learning about writing craft, that their writing will automatically improve. Well, it would be nice if it were so. That would make life a lot easier because then we could just read a book and our writing would magically be professional level. But I use these images all the time because they're appropriate. It's like studying a musical instrument. I can sit and listen to my favorite, jazz pianist play and play and play. I can have all the recordings. I could listen to it. I could listen to Ella Fitzgerald sing. I could listen and listen and listen. But until I try to do it and sound bad and practice and practice and practice and have to deal with the fact that I'm not going to get it the first time, it's going to take a lot of practice and a lot of repetition and feedback and all of that stuff that goes with learning in order for my own work to improve. So that's what holds people back. As long as they're not implementing what they're learning, they don't have to look too closely at their disappointment that what they're currently doing is still at student level. This is such a conundrum. Like, we're studying to learn to do something, but we want our work to already be professional level. What are the odds of that? Again, let me just throw that out there. Leave it to you. So that discomfort can also say, I'm not going to look at my complicated feelings about not only studying, but implementing writing craft. And I'm just going to focus on what my spreadsheet in which I track my word count looks like. Maybe I'll tweak my spreadsheet today. Third reason we might get over involved with the idea of process. You have forgotten or never fully connected with your why. Your why is, why are you doing this? Why are you writing? Why are you seeking to write? Why are you studying writing? Why do you feel moved to write? Everybody has a why. Many of us have many whys. Some of those reasons why are going to involve outcomes that are truly outside of our control. And so if I ask you, what's your why? Why are you doing this? Why are you writing? And your answer is a little superficial, like, well, I really want to get published. That's just been my dream my whole life, to be a published author. I want to dig deeper than that, because you can be a published author. There's all kinds of ways to publish nowadays, but my definition of that is, you want to publish, meaning you want to connect on a profound level with readers who will be changed by your work, who are going to be impacted by your work. And you might say, yeah, that's really what I mean. That's what I mean. So, all right. So now we start to dig deeper. And then the question of, like, okay, you want to impact readers. Cool. What impact do you want to have? In what way do you want to impact these readers? Which readers? Who are your readers? Who are the readers you want to connect with? And what impact do you want to have on them? Oh, okay. Now we're starting to get closer to your why. What impact do you want to have? Now, again, many writers are focused sometimes on metrics that have to do with industry success. And some writers have a connection to maybe a deeper reason, some desire to have a particular impact on a particular type of reader. But is there something even underneath that? What why exists underneath all of that makes it worthwhile having an impact on other people? What is your personal relationship to your legacy? What does it mean? What does it mean to have something to say, and to take up space in the world, and to have a voice? There's a lot of stuff to contemplate. And when you really start to think about why we write, why not only do we make art and value creativity, but why do we particularly choose to write? And what are our hopes for doing that? And again, I can't answer that question for you, but I can remind you that it's a very central question. And if you can really work on that, take your time, keep asking yourself, and drill down, not just to the top level of reasons, or even the level underneath that, but the ones all the way down that have to do with your humanity, how you see yourself in the grand scheme of things, you've got some very solid ground to stand on. And if you have a why, if you truly have a why and a reason for doing this, and you feel steady about it, you're not going to need to build a Rube Goldberg machine of faux discipline to get you to do it, because it will have a more organic quality about it. You won't need so much process, because it's going to be there in its pure, fresh picked form. I hope that makes sense. I think it does. Here's the last thing I want to share about this. My last reason why this overemphasis on process might have taken over your conscious thinking about your work. You've forgotten that it's play. And you've forgotten how to play. This is, true of adults. Being an adult it's a lot of work. Am I right? Being a kid does not fully prepare you for being an adult. And we keep learning these lessons over and over again, right? How many of us get into not just our young adulthood and our middle-aged adulthood, but now, like in my case, like the end of that, and then moving into the, true sage, we'll call it this sage period of adulthood. And we're still saying, am I grown up yet? Like, is this what being an adult is like? Am I doing this right? Am I truly at the grown-ups table? Everybody relates to this, no matter how old you get, you're still like, oh, wow. Oh, this is what being a grown-up is like. Cool. Interesting. It's a lot of responsibility. And we have to make sure, of course, that our connection with that impulse to just play, that our organic impulse to create and to play has not been dropped along the way. Because when we're making stuff up, we're playing. So don't forget that writing, any kind of creative work, is also play. So I just offered you like this kind of heavy stuff, like look at your resistance, dig into your why, But now I'm also asking you, on the other hand, to hold lightness, which is forget all of that and remember that it's play, that play is your birthright. You were born knowing how to play. And if being playful with your creative work and your writing is really challenging and feels foreign, please look at the rest of your life and make sure that you have not completely eliminated play. Now, if you have young children, you play with them and you know exactly what I mean. You can get lost in their play, but don't you also marvel at their capacity to play? You marvel at it. It's incredible the way little kids can play and just be in that space with unself-consciousness. We need to keep a hold of that in ourselves. And if you don't have little kids running around and your life is busy and you're trying to earn a living and you've got, the burdens of the world on your brave shoulders, where in the corners of this are you playing? Are you just completely unself-conscious, having fun, melting into laughter, just really just letting it loose and playing? So I want you to look at that, because the practice of play is essential. It's good for your mental health. It's good for your emotional health. And if you can't get there easily in your writing, get there somewhere else. Find something else that you can really consider as play. And then just remind yourself what that feels like. Retrain your brain to play. And then when you go back to your creative work, try to integrate that. Try to integrate it. So those are the points that I wanted to make today. And let me just quickly review and remind you of, some of the solutions, some of the things that we can do. If we think that we're overemphasizing process, if we're overprocessing our writing practice, first thing to do is to really look at your resistance. See if you can get to know it better. Deal with it at the source, welcome it to the light and integrate it, do the work that you need to do. So look at the resistance. The second thing is examine your feelings about your craft. If you need training, if you need technique, if you need mentorship, you can find it. You can find it for free on this YouTube channel. You can read books. You can find a teacher, take a program, take a course. You can find it, but don't hide from it. Don't hide from the necessary work of knowing how to do it, because if you don't know how to do it, every time you sit down to work, you're going to be the resistance of imposter syndrome and of just simply not knowing is going to really be tough to deal with. So that's also part of, looking it in the face. Reframe your expectations about writing. Trust that you've got learning to do. Third thing is to define your why. Really think about why you want to do this work, what it means to you, what impact do you want to have, what legacy do you want to have, what's the point of it all? Chances are it's not just about you. Dig a little deeper and you'll have some solid ground to stand on that will replace the need to build a structure of fake discipline to get you to do it. It will be intrinsically motivated. And last and not far from least is to remember to play, to keep your sense of play alive in your life and in your writing. Okay? So in conclusion, I really want to have a grilled cheese sandwich right now, I have to admit. But honestly, what I want to remind you all is less processed, more farm to table, less process in overcomplicating our work, and more connection to why we do it. It's the land of making up is a world of play. Remember why your stories matter. And remember too that all of this attention that you might be giving to process, finding your perfect process, if you're operating from a place of writing from the why, it matters who you are as a person. If you want to have an impact on others and you want to take responsibility for that impact, your own level of moral development, of spiritual development, of ethical awareness, of compassion, of empathy matters, because that's what you're bringing to your work. And look outward. Every day we can experience humanity in all its glory and all its foibles, and engage with it. Don't hide in your process. Don't hide in your writing. Your writing is a vehicle for you to have an impact on the world, but what you have to say is informed by how much you yourself have been willing to grow as a human being. You can only offer what you have to offer. So don't forget to engage with life. If you want to be a better writer, a more organic writer, a writer who's got a solid why and some good stuff to say, don't be afraid to engage with life as a human being. You have bring some courage to it. Your writing is not a place to hide. It's a place it's a platform from which to express what you think, what you believe. It's in a sense an opportunity to exhibit leadership, because you're saying, I'm going to put what I think into your head. Do you feel solid about deserving that space in somebody else's head? Have you thought about what you have to say? So engage with life. I think the process of living our lives with, open hearts and an engaged intellect and moral discernment is good for every human being, but it's an absolute prerequisite for writers. So there you go. I hope at the end of the day, your perfect process is going to really boil down to loving the work. Loving the work. Just love the work. That's what I have to say to you guys today. I really enjoyed this topic with you. And I'm looking, Hillary's here today. I always love to see you, Hillary. You needed to hear this today. You know what, Hillary? Maybe I needed to say it today too. These types of questions don't necessarily change that much depending on where we are in our lives and our careers. I think we're always circling around to these questions about why we do the work, and that doesn't matter if you're a person hoping to finish a draft, a person hoping to get published, a person who's, already well into a professional writing career. It doesn't matter. We're all always asking these questions. So you and me both, Hillary, you and me both. Fantastic. Just skimming through to see if we've got any particular questions. Wonderful discussion going on in the comments. I really appreciate all of you being here today. So that's it for today. I will see you next week. And in the meantime, I hope that you'll leave some comments below the video. Some of the stuff that I talked about today, I know is going to take time to sink in, and you may have thoughts to share. So come back and continue the conversation in the comments. I would love it if you did that. And also, if there's something you want me to talk about in a future live stream, please let me know. I'm always inspired by the conversations that I'm part of with all of you, whether it's my Path of the Storyteller community, the folks who come to the live stream, the folks who are in the Facebook group. All of this is derived from what you make me think of. And so I really love it when you contribute to the conversation and give me specific requests, because some of our best topics, I think, come from you. All right. Until I see you next time, happy writing, one and all. I'll see you next Wednesday.